Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you, episode 612, Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. A lot. Are you recovering? Are you certainly you've recovered from Thanksgiving? That Thanksgiving was like Thursday. We've already run out of leftovers from my house. We didn't buy enough. And so there were no leftovers. But then we went back to eating greens and beans and rice. And so we're kind of normalized. But I hope you had a great Thanks Vegan. Listen to shows 611 and 610 where I talk about Thanks Vegan and why it's important to have been vegan. PETA got a lot of flack for their human centric Thanksgiving centerpiece. Well, it was a human. They put a human, and it was not just human, but it was pornographic. It looked like a very leggy female form. And I think the point was, PETA is a female run organization. I think the point was to let people be shocked into understanding what's going on when you eat turkeys. I mean, we only eat tom turkeys a meal. Okay, yeah. Sometimes you eat a hen. But the point is, 45 million turkeys are slaughtered for your Thanksgiving meal. And you've got to start thinking about it as being pornographic. When the killing, the cruelty continues year after year because 85% of the American public insist on having turkey. So, we had a cruelty free vegan meal and no one missed a darn thing. I mean, there was enough cranberry, there was enough mashed potatoes, enough everything else. It's all the sides, after all. I mean, but if you want to have cruelty as your main dish, then have a turkey. But think about it. And, this isn't the only holiday meal. I mean, we're going to have one in December. Think about the next holiday meal. Are you going to have a turkey? Okay, well, we'll spare the 45 million turkeys a meal. Okay, yeah, but then what about the pigs? You going to have a ham? Spare the ham too. Those pigs don't want to be killed. I mean, you look at what goes on in cruelty, those cruelty factories, factory farms. Anyway, just check out show six. This is show 612. Check out show 611 and 610, where I talk about Thanks Vegan. Anyway, I hope you had a good time. I saw, let's see, I saw Barbie for the first time. It's all about her feet. Once she gets her feet straight, it's all right. The world is okay. I thought it was a good movie. I'm late to the game, but instead of going to the theater and watching Barbie in big, 30-foot Barbie stomping all over me, I I chose to get a, reasonable home size 50, 60 inch. That's big enough, right? But I got the video. I bought the video because I'm going to watch Barbie over and over again. And every time I find myself slipping back into the Ken patriarchy, slipping back and sort of losing sight of what 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 the real issues are in the sexual dynamics of American society, or just forget American society, the world. I'm going to rewatch Barbie again. And Greta Gerwig, one of my favorite directors, Frances Ha, one of my favorite movies, Frances Ha. So anyway, I saw Barbie finally, enjoyed it. I also happened to catch a lot of these things are accidental. I went on Max, HBO Max, because it's not an automatic watch HBO anymore since it's all app, and it used to be on my cable system, but since I don't do the cable system deal, I do it on the app. I don't go to the app like as a matter of course as I flip the stations. And so I caught Albert Brooks's, or it's Rob Reiner's movie, Defending Your Life, which is a documentary not to be confused with the movie of the same name. I didn't realize he did a whole movie about Muslims in America or the humor. It's a movie about why Muslims are funny. That's not the exact precise term, but I found it on Apple TV. I started watching it after the documentary, which was great because the documentary, if you have been puzzled by the great talent of Albert Brooks, because sometimes I can see why maybe you have been. Of course, he is just a comic genius and has been since he was much younger in the 70s. I remember all his albums, listened to all his albums, very dry, very sarcastic, very witty. So I loved him, of course, but he's one of those guys where he throws out 10 jokes, two will land big. Eight kind of, you say, but two land huge. That I like him. I like those odds, especially when he lands huge. But Albert Brooks is really he always has been a guy. I don't want to overuse the term icon, but he has been the guy who stretched the limits, was the alternative. So I started watching the documentary, then I saw the film about Muslim. He's sent to India and Pakistan on assignment by the U.S. government. This is fictional, and it's his story about, oh, he's got to do a 500-page report. He's never done a 500-page report. Very funny movie so far. I'm only like a quarter of the way in, but I like it. Very funny, and maybe is it funnier than his other? I love The Muse with Sharon Stone at the height of her power. Sharon Stone. I Lost in America, of course, and Modern Romance. I mean, I had to watch it again recently. I love all his films, but it's his roles as uh, a straight actor where he scores. He scores and he soars. Broadcast news, you know, that was a role. I saw him in Taxi Driver opposite Sybil Shepherd, and then the documentary shows some other roles where he plays a bad guy, which I did not recall. I had not seen. Anyway, very entertaining documentary, Rob Reiner. You get the whole Albert Brooks story. His father, Harry Einstein, Parky Akarkis was his showbiz name. He was a radio comic. And they go into why Albert Brooks really had to change his name. I mean, he's legally Albert Einstein. And of course, if your name was Albert Einstein, you too would change your name to Albert Brooks. So anyway, so that's kind of like the fun things that I did over the holiday. And I saw some football. I saw some Thanksgiving Day parade, of course. But I've been just immersed in all the stuff that's happening in the Middle East. And I'm going to talk about my ALDEF column today, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, because there definitely was an Asian flavor to the hostage release that, the first big one on Friday spilled over yesterday on Sunday. You saw one of the hostages was a Filipino guy. And this is the thing that I really loved. I mentioned this in my ALDEF column because, well, first of all, Jimmy Pacheco, he's the guy. You go to the ALDEF blog, and I show a picture of Jimmy Pacheco, and you can tell which guy was held hostage for nearly 50 days, right? Because it's not the ambassador and the other official who are like well fed and kind of bulky compared to Jimmy. Looks like an anorexic. It's like, what the heck happened? And this is the problem. They weren't tortured necessarily. The reports are that they just didn't have much to eat. I don't know what they didn't torture them, beat them. Their mental health, you never know, but they weren't being fed as regularly or as much. So I write about post Thanksgiving weeks. Black Friday was more like Asian Friday. with a little something extra to be thankful for if you were following the world news from the Middle East. And, you expected 13 Israeli women and children swapped out for the 39 Palestinians in this first major exchange. I think there was a little exchange before, but this was the big one, right? On Friday. They had one uh, on Saturday, I believe, and then they had another one. They're about to have one today. This is Monday. They're extending the ceasefire, the truce, whatever you want to call it, but it's a pause, not peace, but it's a pause. They're extending it, which is great. But I loved on Friday through Saturday, where all the breathless reporting had to, in order to be comprehensive, they had to honor the big surprise that among the first released on Friday included 10 Thais and one Filipino. 10 Thai nationals and one Filipino. And I mean, not to be self centered, but I know that I have some friends who are saying, oh, Filipino. Because I know this. I have these white friends who they hear Filipino and say, oh, yeah, like Emil. I think I'm their only Filipino friend. But my question to you, who don't think about Emil as the only Filipino, you Asian Americans out there, who amongst us really expected to hear that phrase? 10 Thais and one Filipino. I mean, they aren't Asian American, but they're Asian nationals. Still, if you're an AAPI who had been keeping an arm's length from the news of the day, just because it's a complicated situation, you don't want to go on half cocked about the Middle East situation without knowing the history of Palestine, without knowing the history of Palestinians, without knowing the history of the Jewish, uh, occupation, settlements, the British, the colonization or the colonizers' viewpoint of Britain, and then the United States. I mean, I know a lot of people out there who are AAPI who just, you know, are observing. But if you saw an Asian face among the hostages when you weren't expecting it, I mean, you were instantly drawn into this story like never before. The global crisis had an Asian face with Asians caught in the middle. And, you had to really scurry to find information. You had to go to Thai news outlets. There was stuff in the Guardian. Finally, on Monday, there was stuff in the Times and the Washington Post. There was a quote from one of the Thai hostages, Vitun Vitun Fumi, Phoome. And the Thai names are always so interesting. Vitun Fumi, 33. He was in the group release Friday that included 9 Thai men, 1 Thai woman, and like most of them, they'd been, Fume was one of 30,000 Thai nationals working on Israeli farms. They're all ag workers. Now, how is this? Well, if you know the situation in these countries, people are looking for jobs. There's relationships between the Thais and the Middle East, specifically Iran, and workers go all over the Middle East, including Israel. That's where they were working. Fume worked on a potato and pomegranate farm near Gaza, and he called his sister Rangaroon Wichengerm. Wichenjern. Like I said, I love Thai names. They were on a video call. It was reported on the Guardian. Said not to worry. They hadn't been tortured. They were in good spirits. By Sunday, in addition to the 10 Thai, another 4 Thai hostages were released, meaning there were 16 still being held, according to the Thai government. But get this, Israeli officials said that since October 7th, 39 Thai nationals had been killed and it's the largest number of foreign people killed or missing because of the war. But only because of the hostage situation do we see an Asian face. Now, I've seen other Asian faces. There was a story in the Times of Israel about a Filipina who was a caregiver in the kibbutz that was taken over by Hamas or terrorized by Hamas, and she was seen as a hero. She wasn't taken hostage, but there was one Filipino. That Filipino, Eleanor, Jimmy. Oh, well, if your name was Eleanor, you'd change it to Jimmy too. Eleanor Jimmy Pacheco. He's 33 years old. He was not an ag worker, but he worked as a caregiver to 80-year-old Amitai Ben Zvi in kibbutz near Oz. Kibbutz near Oz, that was the original strike point of Hamas on October 7th. According to the Times of Israel, Pacheco called his friends on October 7th and said he was being kidnapped and that Zvi, whom he had cared for in the last 4 years, he'd been there 5, that Zvi had been killed. And it was the last time Pacheco was heard from until this past weekend, 49 days after this whole ordeal began. Still ongoing, but the specific ordeal of Pacheco as hostage now ended. You could see the picture. If you go to aldef.org/blog, you'll see a picture of Jimmy. He's the guy in the middle in the lime green shirt or yellowish green shirt, skinny. He survived. And he's with the other guys who look like they haven't missed a meal. Those are the guys who worked at the embassy. And Jimmy is quoted by the Philippine embassy in a release saying, "I'm only alive because of the Lord." Very religious Filipino, working in Israel. "Even on the day they abducted me, I was really thinking about my family. While I was in Gaza, I just wanted to live for my family." Notice he says, "I wanted to live for my family, not live with my family." Because this is the case of the Philippine diaspora, where one is always thinking about the survival of one's family. I mean, this has always been the case for Filipinos for as long as Filipinos have been on the move. I mean, even here to America, this wasn't the case with my father, but I had many manongs and uncles who came from the Philippines, had family in the Philippines, came to the United States to work, sent money back, remittances. That tradition continues to this day for many families if they haven't permanently settled and become, citizens. I'm talking from the beginning, from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. It's still happening. There are still Filipinos who send billions of dollars in remittances from all over the world, not just the United States. The United States, we know. But if you look at the diaspora, you know that the Philippine diaspora extends all over the world, Middle East, Europe, and they're always thinking about their survival of one's family. For Pacheco, he had his wife, Clarice Joy. He had 3 children. And the reality is, because there's no suitable work for, in the Philippines, one is forced to go thousands of miles away, 15 hours by air, to work as a caretaker, in this case in Israel. It's the only way to be your own family's financial caretaker. That's the price of diaspora. And it's a grim Filipino reality. As I said, my own family regularly did contract work in the Middle East. I have cousins, first cousins, right, who went to Saudi Arabia, went to Europe. One of my female cousins married and has made her life in the Middle East. So the immigrant dream isn't always through America. And what is the choice if you're Filipino? If you can support your family in the Philippines, You'll go wherever, even if it means living far away from them and hardly seeing them. It's the unnatural, natural way of life in the Philippines and apparently in Thailand too, because those released hostages were service workers desperately seeking ways to serve in order to provide for their own families. And the released Thai hostages, at least according to reports, were expected to be united with their families in Thailand, but that's not necessarily the case for Pacheco. In fact, as Pacheco was released, I want to play this. I mean, because it's wild, actually. If you see Jimmy Pacheco, here's a shot. This is on Instagram. Jimmy Pacheco. Look at that. He's a hero. Jimmy Pacheco. I mean, that's Jimmy Pacheco given the hero treatment. My God. There he is, Jimmy Pacheco. I mean, see how skinny he's got his rolly bag, and he's like leaving the hospital there in Israel. But can you imagine that? I mean, Jimmy Pacheco, he's a hero, and so the Israelis treated him appropriately. They not only cheered him when he left the hospital, but Pacheco was promised lifetime Social Security benefits and stipends from the Israeli government that they normally reserve that for Israeli victims of terrorist attacks. So Pacheco's being taken care of like he's an Israeli guy. The Philippine government, well, they said they might provide financial assistance should Pacheco return home. But when asked, the Philippine Foreign Undersecretary, Eduardo de Vega, was asked what's going to happen to Pacheco, and he said, well, it's up to him whether he wants to stay in Israel or come home. Here's the quote that was in the Inquirer.net. He said, he already is based there, he has a job. And then he said, if his wife wants to wants to visit him there, she won't need a visa. We can pay for it if she wants to go on a compassionate visit. Oh my God. It's like they know that Jimmy Pacheco has a good thing. They're not going to like disrupt his gravy train, even though his good thing's in a war zone. Compassionate visit, they really mean conjugal visit, which I thought was kind of an odd answer, right? It's like, it's strange. I mean, after you've been held hostage by Hamas somewhere in Gaza, wouldn't you want to go back to the loving arms of family in the Philippines immediately to experience the relative comfort of home? But can you afford to? Right? How am I going to pay the bills in the Philippines? There's no jobs in the Philippines. Well, he's got his Israeli pension. But now, does that make him feel like he's obligated to stay in Israel to like duke it out for the Israelis? I mean, this is what happens. I mean, there's no automatic answer when in your native land, the Philippines, diaspora is the way of life for way too many people. And like I said, that's always been the case. The diaspora, it began like when the Philippines was a colony of the United States. My father, the first in the big group to come to America in the 1920s, a colonized American national born in the Philippines. Here's the thing: once he left, he never went back, not to live. I mean, for my dad, the balance of life always tipped America's way, even with racism and discrimination that he faced. So, where's the home for these now in the Filipino diaspora? Many of whom find their way to both Israel and even to places like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. Where do they go? I mean, I had a regular conversation with a guy I met in one of my pandemic classes. He was a buddy in Saudi Arabia. We had just regular Zoom chats. Um, like I said, I have a cousin of mine is married and lives in the Middle East. And now Jimmy Pacheco is free from Hamas and can go back home to Asia. But guess what? His best option may be to stay put in the war zone and remit money back to the islands. This is the irony for Asians caught in the middle in Gaza, to be out of place, far from home, in a war that is above all about the right to a homeland. The kind of irony that you can find a Filipino or an Asian because of the diaspora fighting on both sides, working in Saudi, working in Israel, getting kidnapped. I mean, some people say that's why the Thai were able to get out as many people. First of all, there were a lot of Thai nationals, and there were groups working alongside the government groups, but they didn't have the kind of connections that some of the on the ground groups had that the government didn't have, and that's why you're seeing more Thai nationals come out. There might be another Filipino held. There have been evacuations from Israel, Filipinos, but Friday, Jimmy Pacheco comes home or goes free. The issue is, where's home for Jimmy Pacheco now? I don't know. I hope he's well. I hope he gets a good meal. I hope he gets to talk to his family. I hope he goes home to his family or feels like he can. Can't go back to the kibbutz. What's he going to do? But the Philippines certainly didn't know when they were asked, the government officials. Just one of those ironies. A Asian flavored hostage release on Friday, and some of the questions that you don't really see being raised elsewhere. But I'm Filipino, so I'm raising them, and now you get a perspective that's a little different. Today's the 27th of November, and for my family, the Guillermo family, the immigration story, which I said began when my father came to the U.S. from the Philippines as a colonized American in 1928. After the immigration law changed in 1965, my father's nephew came to America, petitioned for his brothers and sisters, one of whom did not come to America, but came to America briefly just to visit and then went to the Middle East. That's a part of the diaspora. Decades of visa backlogs and snafus later, the next big wave of the Guillermo family finally arrived to the U.S. in the 1990s. I mean, because you imagine, the laws opened up in 65, backlog 20 years. They didn't really apply till the 70s, 20 years, puts you like 95, 98. Stephen, my cousin, was one of those who came in the late 1990s, born in the Philippines, raised in San Francisco. He was a Guillermo 1.5er. You know the type. The Koreans have a 1.5 generation. Even, mainstream Filipinos, who may have immigrated, parents immigrated in the 80s with kids, young kids, born in the Philippines, raised here. That's a 1.5. So Stefan was a 1.5er, but he died American style gunned down in 2014 when he entered the wrong apartment in his building, south of Market. I wrote about it a lot on the All Def blog in my columns, 2014. If you go to the All Def blog today, there's a big sign that was the Jumbotron scoreboard at then it was AT&T Park, not Oracle, but it was AT&T. And then they changed it to Oracle. But it showed Stefan in his Giants jersey and his eye black, and it was like his epitaph, his tombstone, his digital tombstone. Stefan Guillermo, 1987, 2014, American Filipino Giants fan taken too soon. November 27th, as I speak, would have been his 36th birthday. I mean, a lot of people say, God, he's a little old. Yeah, yeah, he died in 2014, 9 years ago. He was 27, 26, because he died in May, shot in May. But he took his time getting through San Francisco State. He had to work, and but finally he did. And then he got his when he was about to graduate that June, he was shot in May. At the time, I wrote about the day that he was given a posthumous degree from San Francisco State. It was coincidentally in the room dedicated to Native American activist Richard Oakes. And if in the recent holiday commotion you were unable to pause to observe Indigenous Peoples Day on Friday, November 24th, well, I wrote the column 2014, and it's about my cousin's case and Richard Oakes. And you can go to the link on the Aldef blog and talk about the fight. I talk about the fight for Native American justice, and I talk about the posthumous degree of my cousin Stefan. On that column I wrote in 2014, we talked about the Washington football team, and what do you know? There's a victory. Native American mascotry beat back the old name, and now they're the Washington Commanders. So a victory there, which shows you that things can change, things can happen. But they didn't happen for Stefan. I mean, he got his degree, but we didn't get justice. The DA wouldn't prosecute because of the gun laws. The gun laws say that if you go into an apartment, even though you think it's your apartment, it's the wrong apartment, if the guy on the other side has a gun and you enter the apartment, the guy with the gun can shoot you legally. And that was the case with my cousin. He was shot dead, single bullet. Guy on the other side knew the law, gunned him down. So when Stefan was given the posthumous degree, June 19th or mid June 2014, it was in the Richard Oakes multicultural room at San Francisco State. And it was kind of fitting in a way because Stefan didn't get justice. We kept fighting. DA wasn't budging, wasn't going to. The man who shot Stefan, they got him, put him behind bars for 3 days, the legal limit that they could hold him, and then let him go free. They wouldn't prosecute. So, like I said, it was fitting that he was in the multicultural room of Richard Oakes. Oakes Also, looking for justice, never got it. Mohawk Native American from upstate New York made his name when he made a bold move to take back the land, specifically Alcatraz in the middle of San Francisco Bay. He joined other activists between 1969 to 71, and they were going to own the island and establish an Indian university and cultural center there. That was the goal of Richard Oakes. It was their utopian community, this old prison. And so the Oaks led occupation was going strong for a couple of years, and then it fell apart when Oakes left, when his 13-year-old stepdaughter died in an accident. And it was an important occupation, but they didn't reach the goal they wanted, but it did show that the Native Americans were were serious about Indian self-determination, and they were willing to fight the government. And it was considered that stance on Alcatraz was considered a turning point. So it turns out that Oakes, ironically, also was a victim of a personal handgun that makes it more than a coincidence that there was Stephen's ceremony right there in the room named for Oakes, a kind of spiritual symbolism. And so I write about that. I write about how we were waiting for the DA in San Francisco to come up with something. They were waiting for toxicology and medical examiner reports in June of that year, but nothing that came out would be strong enough to change their mind that they weren't going after the killer, given the way California's homicide law was set up, which presumes that the shooter had a right to deadly force against an intruder. And that is how Stephen's case ended to this day. Family has no justice. Most of the family has forgotten about it, frankly, except me on these key dates, like his birthday, November 27, 1987, and on days like the day he died in 2014 and the day in June that he got his posthumous degree. But it shows how the struggle continues, and even though we lose, it's just another step. We don't give up. We don't give up. So I was, so I mean, today I always just take a little time to remember Stephen would always see him at the left hand. He worked at the left hand store in Pier 39, and I just thought he was the best. He was the future. Stephen, a sad tragedy in the family. All right, checking the other news. Saw something AP writing about how they're writing about how, isn't it great that we got all these third parties, and and on the story they talk about how no one really wants to see Trump and Biden get at it. Although you got to admit what Biden has done, given the world situation, I think it's pretty admirable. It's the reason why the things are going strong is because America is overseeing the negotiations between Qatar and Hamas. And I think that there's some movement. I don't know who is going to take over Gaza, but when Biden says Hamas has to go, I think there is some agreement among all parties that Hamas has to go, or Hamas has to find some way to sneak off and be neutered, just not have a hand in the potential of a two-state solution. But I hear people on both sides saying, "Yeah, we want to consider a two-state solution." I have basically spent a lot of time this Thanksgiving period just going over some of the history of Israel and Palestine, and it's just interesting how people lose touch. In fact, that relates to the whole Jimmy Pacheco story, because when you understand the Philippine diaspora, as I said, it's the irony that Filipinos can't make it in their homeland. They have to go to the Middle East, to Israel and Saudi Arabia, and then to discover that they have a homeland issue. They don't know where they belong after they've been released. As I said, Jimmy Pacheco doesn't know where he's going to go. I guess he's going to go to his family and three kids, but Israel's given him a kind of a sweetheart deal to stay. Well, not to stay necessarily, but the Philippines says, well, he's got a job, he's getting paid there. I don't know if there's strings attached, but this is a problem with diaspora. Anyway, Joe Biden is, I think, doing a better job than people think, and he's not getting any credit for it. Just like people are buying stuff like crazy, like something like 7.8 billion or something was, for Black Friday. People, say that they have terrible feelings about the economy, but they spend like crazy, and they're going to spend like maybe 10 billion on Cyber Monday, which is today. And Biden gets no credit for, putting money in your pocket. So everyone talks about third parties making a dent, and this one AP story today mentions every third party candidate. Cornel West, Jill Stein, the discredited, all the anti-vaxxers, Jill Stein, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Dean, what's his face? Dean Phillips is mentioned. Did they mention Marianne Williamson? No, which I find incredible because in some polls, Marianne Williamson is like getting 16% among those leaning Democrats. In one poll, she's getting up to 27% among Gen Zs. I think if you're interested in a third party candidate who would be totally different, which would be good, and she'd have a department for children, she'd have a department of peace. I mean, she's no hippy dippy candidate, although that's kind of I mean, Jerry Brown was no hippy dippy candidate. He was governor of California, mayor of Oakland, but he was saddled with a stereotypical image because people thought he was too woke. If you want a politician who is different, who will talk about your needs and talk about the people, give Marianne Williamson a look because no one's talking about her. There seems to be, she claims, and people who support her claim there's a blackout. I don't know if that's true, but a lot of people don't consider her seriously. But how can you consider Bobby Kennedy Jr., Dean Phillips, who just got in the race, Jill Stein, who just got in the race, how do you consider them more serious than Marianne Williamson, who has been an announced candidate for a long time, is beating the pavement, is in all the state. Well, she's making the rounds in states, has polled better than Dean Phillips. Give Marianne a look because she makes sense. She hasn't been a politician, neither is Cornel West, and he gets mentioned in a lot of stories that I read. This third party AP story that just ran over the wire within the last hour. Check it out. And but better just to not check it out, but just acknowledge the fact that it's going to leave out Marianne Williamson, who is a third party candidate who is worthy of your consideration. Anyone who leads with love instead of hate in a time like we are today is worth a second look or worth a first look. She ran again last time in 2020. I think she dropped out toward the end, but she was in one debate. Marianne Williamson. Check her out. All right, just a couple more things, and then we'll head out and come back tomorrow. Um, big poll on religious prejudice and how it's growing. I'll get into that tomorrow. The whole thing about polls, they never ask Asian Americans about polls, which makes me just feel like, God, I, it, it, it sort of exposes how the polls are inadequate. And they have to, well, they have to have a large sample size of Asians to make any sense, but they never do. They just never do. So, but I'll get into it. It's all about how religious prejudice is growing. Well, how about guys who wear the keffiyeh, the Palestinian scarf? In Burlington, Vermont, we got 3 Palestinian students. They'd come to America and they were attending, I guess they were at University of Vermont to visit, but they attended school at Trinity, at Haverford, which is Bryn Mawr's male school, Haverford. And then also, I think one of them went to Brown. So the latest is police in Burlington, Vermont are investigating whether a weekend shooting that left 3 college students of Palestinian descent injured was hate motivated. The latest is Jason J. Eaton, 48, the suspect arrested in connection with the shooting that hospitalized the 3 20-year-olds, pleaded not guilty today to 3 counts of attempted murder. Eaton faces a potential sentence of life in prison over the charges, Burlington Mayor Miro Weinberger said in a press conference today. While we are waiting for more facts, we know this: there is absolutely no place for violence or hate in America, President Biden said. The 3 men, Hisham Awartani, Kinan Abdelhamid, and Tassin Ali Ahmad, were publicly identified by their families as being the shooting victims via a post on X, which is increasingly the kind of racist, anti-Semitic place on the internet now. You got Elon Musk kowtowing to the Israelis, I guess, to try to buy favor because he's losing money. 75 million is the estimated losses in ad revenue. Burlington police said in a Sunday statement that two of the men were stable and one has sustained much more serious injuries. Let's hope and pray they all are fine. I mean, in America, you should be able to wear a keffiyeh and not feel any more threatened than you would if you wore a Mets jersey to a Yankee game. I know that's a real thing. Or a Dodger jersey to a Giants game, or vice versa. But this is serious stuff. I mean, you wearing the colors, like the red and the blue. Are you blood? Are you the Crip? People, it's this gang mentality, and it seems to be developing. Two of the victims are U.S. citizens. See, that's the thing. People see you with, I mean, after 9/11, with people with turbans. People see you with turban, they'll say, "Oh, you're a terrorist." No, I'm a Sikh. It's part of my religion. I'm not, you know. And now it's like that whole thing is coming back up again. Two of the victims are U.S. citizens. One is a legal resident, so they, green card holder. Awartani is a Palestinian Irish American junior at Brown. See, mixed marriages. We have a blood interest in each other, and we don't recognize it. And then some guy goes off with a gun and allegedly shoots them. Abdelhamid is a junior at Haverford. Ahmad attends Trinity College, according to the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. The three friends may have been targeted because of their Arab ancestry and identity, Brown University President Christina Paxson said in a statement. So the police said the suspect confronted them on Prospect Street there in Burlington, discharged at least 4 rounds from a pistol without speaking to them before fleeing on foot. Two of those shot were wearing keffiyehs at the time of the assault, though police said there's no additional information to suggest the suspect's motive for the shooting. The Council on American Islamic Relations on Sunday said it would offer a $10,000 reward for any information. Nicholas Carest, U.S. Attorney for the District of Vermont, said Sunday night that the U.S. Attorney's Office and Civil Rights Division will assess the evidence generated to determine whether a federal crime may have been committed. The victim's parents said in a statement they're devastated by the horrific news that our children were targeted and shot in Burlington. It's terrible. Awartani's mother, Elizabeth Price, said on Monday that her son was shot near his grandmother's house in a street he's basically grown up on. The short-term shock is now evolving into something more complex as he tries to frame who he is in the world and what it means to be safe in America. I mean, we're all trying to do that, right? I mean, Asian Americans during the pandemic, when Trump and others are trying to blame the pandemic on the Chinese, calling it the China virus and the Kung flu, people went to attack Chinese people, but they were attacking Filipinos. They were attacking all the other Asians. Seen one, seen them all. And here are guys who are three Palestinian students, rightfully proud of their heritage, in solidarity with the Palestinian cause. They're wearing their scarf and they get shot. This isn't supposed to happen in America. Not in America. Okay, we'll follow that and see where it goes. I hope that all three of the victims recover, but that could be a turning point. I mean, there are other sad incidents that have occurred throughout the country, but it's like the war is coming here, and it shouldn't. Not in the United States. Just shouldn't. Okay, we're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific or thereabouts, live or recorded. We like to be live. Tomorrow I might be recorded. Um, Check us out on YouTube at Amok1, on Facebook at fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media, on Twitter or X, formerly known as Twitter, at Amok. That's EMILAMOK. My website, I still have to fix a little bit, but it's up. You can email me through there at amok.com. We like to close with a little meditation. Always works, a little self love. It's love, but self love first. And then, it's like when you put on the mask in the airplane. By the way, if you're on the airplane this weekend, hope you survived. If you're listening to this, I know you did. But you know how they say, put your mask on first and help your little one? Well, self love, or love works the same way. First, be kind to yourself, offer it to others. Loving self compassion never fails. And we end with a little metta, METTA. It goes like this. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal